I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so good. So I wanted to start, before I start the show, I'm going to start with a prayer. So
Okay.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not to temptation, and deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Hallelujah.
Amen.
Yay. And I am so, I'm just going to go ahead and just start right on, Kayla.
Okay.
This is Mercedes Lucke-Benedict, and this is the Mercedes Lucke-Benedict Show. And we are coming to you soon, live stream from Spreaker. This show will be on Spreaker, on the Mercedes Lucke-Benedict Show, and that is Web Radio Network. And today's guest is Kayla COX. And Kayla, hi!
Hi.
So Kayla, the funny thing is, so a little background. So a year ago, I was diagnosed with the diabetes 2. And so, and I thought I was going to die. So right away, and I was shocked that happened because I'd never had that before. My father had died when I was 22 years old from complications due to diabetes 2. So I really was so scared. So I went into prayer mode, and I the first person that came for me was Dr. Jason Fung. So I started right away absorbing all of his teachings. The second person to come along was Kayla COX. The third person to come along was Dr. Eric Burke. Because of you helped transform my life. I'm not perfect yet, but every day I know I can go over and listen to Kayla COX, or I can pick up my book, 6 Miles to Supper, and I can find you on YouTube, and I really resonate with you, Kayla. And I'm so excited that you're here today. It's like a blessing to me.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You're so welcome. And you know what I just love about you? You're just so normal. You're such a normal person. Like, you can really relate to you. And I just feel it's like a comfortable feeling just to be around, listening and all that. And I know that your audience, or the people that you're helping, I'm sure that they feel the same way. Can you tell us can you tell the audience and everyone when this, I know when, but can you talk a little bit about your background and a little bit about how this began for you?
Sure. So I always struggled with my weight from the time I was a little kid. I remember I was like about 6 years old, and the doctor put me on a diet, gave me this like list of foods you can't eat, and or at least that's how I remember it. And I just always struggled, like as a kid, I was usually overweight, although I was really active too. So I kind of, I was on diets all the time. And so sometimes I would be thinner and sometimes I would be overweight. And when I was about 17, I got down to a pretty good weight. I took Metabolift, which was this pill that has ephedra in it, but it was, supposed to boost your metabolism. And that was like one period of time where I felt like I'm at a good weight, but then the FDA banned it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to actually have to figure out how to eat, the right amount. And when I turned 19, I married my college sweetheart, and he was in the Marine Corps. So during that time, I started to gain weight again. So I think mainly because of the stress of him being deployed and things like that. And we also started having kids as his deployment, as his enlistment ended. I started to gain more weight because I had my first child. I gained like 60 pounds with that first pregnancy. And I lost the weight again. And then with the second and then third child, it was kind of like I would gain a bunch of weight and then I would lose most of it. And then I would, gain more weight with the next pregnancy and then not really lose as much. And so with the third child, I just stopped weighing. I was like, I don't want to weigh anymore. And so I went along like that for a couple of years. And then in 2014, I got tagged in these photos on Facebook. And I didn't recognize myself. I was just like mortified at that time because of how I was so far off in like reality. I had just really stuck my head in the sand. And in that moment, I was just like, I was in a really dark place, and I was I was thinking my family would be better off without me, which was a terrible thing to think, but in that moment I was scared of the thoughts that I was having and how low I felt. And I prayed. I was just like, God, please help me, because before that I never really thought about asking for God's help with this thing. I just kind of thought, this is something I need to handle, like I don't need to ask God for help with this. Like, I've got to figure this out. And then in that moment, I just prayed to God, and sure enough, he helped me.
Right. It's so amazing, isn't it? We think that we're not supposed to ask for things like that are so personal, right? But look what happened, and really, look what happened. You weren't doing this before. You weren't, and it's your journey. That's happened to so many people, including me. And I understand, Kayla, because like in school, like I had that too. I was up and down. It's not easy to do that, especially once you have your children and all that. So, but look. So then what happened? So then God answered your prayers. And can you talk, what was the next thing that occurred? Sure.
So that first year, in 2014, I really wanted to figure out, okay, what am I supposed to do? Like, how can I eat? I wanted to solve this problem permanently. I didn't want to just go on a crash diet and then, lose the weight and then, just gain it all back like I always did. Like, I really wanted to do it right. But for the first year, I still struggled, like I was trying a bunch of stuff, but really not sticking with things. Like, I would run 3 miles a day, and I would do that for like 5 days in a row. And then I would get frustrated because I was like, I don't feel like I'm losing any weight. And then I would say, like, I just need to eat less. But, like I didn't really know what that meant, like I felt like I wasn't really eating more than other people. I would look around and I would think, like, I feel like I'm thinking more about this than anybody else I know. And yet I'm not doing the right stuff for whatever reason. So at the end of that year, though, I learned about intermittent fasting. I just kind of like came across this blog that mentioned it, and I kind of thought, that sounds like something maybe I could do. Like, it just appealed to me, like the idea that I could just like not eat for a certain period of time and then just eat, during this window, and then that would help me lose weight. And so I started kind of messing with that a little bit. And then the next big thing that happened was in February of 2015, I finally got on the scale for the first time in years and years. And I thought, I'd probably be like 185 pounds. I'm 5'6". So I thought 185, that's probably where I'm at. Because I had weighed myself at various points, previous, in my life. And so I just thought I had an idea of what I weighed. And when I got on the scale, I was 222.2 pounds. And I was just like, how can I still be this far off in my, like, thinking where I'm at and the actual reality? So, but that was one of the best things I ever did, was to weigh, because it finally, like, held me accountable to my plan. Like, I was able to see, like, is what I'm doing actually working? And if not, then I need to change something. And so that year, in 2015, I started weighing every day, and I continue to weigh every day to this very day. It's just like a thing I do, like, brushing my teeth, flossing my teeth. And I'm just going to do that as part of, keeping myself healthy, is because obviously I have this ability to kind of stick my head in the sand and deceive myself about where I'm at with my weight. So So I started to practice intermittent fasting, but still, even in 2015, I'm just a slow learner, I guess. I was just continuing to quit a lot, like I was in a really big rush. I really wanted to lose like 5 pounds a week. I was like, especially once I found out what I weighed, because at that point that meant I was obese. And I was like, I'm obese, therefore I need to be like dropping weight fast. Like that's how, just in my head, that's what made sense. And so I thought, okay, well, anything less than 5 pounds a week is failure. And so I was working out so hard. I was going to the gym every day. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I would go to the gym before, most other people were there, because I'm an introvert. And so I wanted to just kind of be in my own little bubble. And I was doing all this stuff. I was working out really hard. And I wasn't like, my eating, I just wasn't being consistent, like I would do intermittent fasting for a while, but, and the scale was moving down, but it wasn't fast enough. And so, in like July of that year, I injured my back, cause I was trying to, do really heavy deadlifts, and I was trying to go too fast. Basically, I was rushing everything. And so I hurt myself. And, so the only thing that I could do, that didn't hurt was to walk. And so, by the end of that year, I had lost like an initial 20 pounds that year. But then, I got stuck because when the injury happened, and then my weight started to trend back up. And so by the end of that year, I was like, I just wanted to quit again, because I thought, like, here I am. It was, almost 2 years since I've been tagged in those Facebook photos, and I hadn't really made the progress that I thought I would have. Like I expected by that point I would have been done. And so I decided to review. I had been keeping notes, like what am I doing on a week-to-week basis, like, and what are my results. And so when I look back at my sheet, I realized my problem was I just kept quitting. Like I literally wrote down, intermittent fasting doesn't work. I'm not going to do that anymore. So
you say that.
Yeah. So, but then when I just looked at that sheet and I really started to look back at my progress, I realized, when I was actually doing intermittent fasting, the weight was coming off. It was like 1 pound a week, but it was coming off. And I thought to myself, if I had just stuck with it, I would be down like 50 pounds probably. But my problem was, like, I just kept quitting, So in 2016, I thought, okay, I'm not going to quit. Like, I've got to figure this out. And so I wrote down like a simple plan. I wrote down intermittent fasting 6 days a week, cheat day on Sunday, and walk 6 miles a day. And that was just my plan. It was like really, really simple. I was like, I'm going to eat whatever I want in the eating window. I don't want to have any kind of restrictions on the types of foods or things like that. And so sure enough, when I did that, it was 1 pound a week. And by the end of that year, about November, I was down to 157 pounds. So
that's so great. And I totally understand everything, because what you're saying to me is just so like me, like wanting to give up, and then you get so frustrated because you have a lot to go, and then I really like what you do about I follow that, where I just eat whatever I want, and it does work in just that one meal or that hour. So yeah, it's really, really amazing. And the 6, so it always kind of, I had to keep listening to you, but I always thought she walks 6 miles every day before supper. But then I realized that you kept your walker, you have a little app, and that you'd make sure you got your steps in. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I was just trying to be clever with the name of my YouTube channel, because I was like, how do I describe what I did in order to lose weight? And I was like, well, I basically, at the end of the day, what I did was I ate 1 meal a day and I walked 6 miles a day. So, but it was certainly true that I would get my steps in even at midnight. So a lot of times, I ate, supper, and then I still had to walk my 6 miles. So, because I used to be really, really bad at like procrastinating on my steps until the last minute. So, but yeah, I used a Fitbit. So, just, keeping track of my steps. I would put it on first thing in the morning, and then I would just keep track of my steps throughout the day. And for me, 6 miles is 14,000 steps. So I was just every day, working towards that 14,000 step goal. And sometimes that meant like I would just walk for 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there. And then other times I would walk the whole thing all in one big go, because, maybe there's just like this one window of time where I could get it done. But that's the only exercise I did in order to lose the bulk of my weight.
That's so great. See, so you inspired me so much. Like on our property, we could walk around because it's fenced in now. It used to not be fenced. And so we live on 5 acres that wasn't fenced before, but now it is. So what I did was, after listening about that, I learned how many steps it would take to walk around the houses, like in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband's shop here, so we have like a circle around. So if I go around 6.5 times around this circle, it's 1 mile. Still, it's actually not bad. It's like walking around a small track, right? So it was neat. You inspired me to find out my steps. So I love it. And I'm going to list off right now for everyone, because I want to list off your books. So
okay.
I have The Laid Back Guide to Intermittent Fasting, How I Lost Over 80 Pounds. I have that book and I love it. And then you've got the Overcoming Weight Loss Obstacles, which I want to get. So that sounds, I know from listening to you all the time that you have wonderful ideas on that. And then you have a cool book called Escape from, is it Olszek?
Mm-hmm.
Olszek Castle. So that sounds really good. So Escape from Olszek's Castle.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found that you have a book, I think, with your husband. So Plan for Change. So it's called Plan for Changes, a Jimmy Stevens story, book 2. And that's a co-wrote. And then Keep Talking, Communication Habits for Getting Along, from Getting Along All Marriage Long. I love that title. And you know what? You need that. Who did you write that? Who's Josephine Cox?
It should be John Cox. I don't know if but that's my husband. So
oh my! I thought it said Josephine. I maybe just didn't see it properly. Okay, so your husband wrote it with you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
that is so great. That's so funny. You guys, I've seen him on there, and I love that you work together with your husband. I do too. My husband comes on and helps me a lot. So, so when did you write that book?
So we wrote that together. It was actually several years ago. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Kim Smith. She and her husband they're kind of known as the Incredible Shrinking Smiths, I believe. But they did intermittent fasting, and they lost an incredible amount of weight. And so they had written a book called Unbelievable Freedom. And we hooked up because I wanted to interview them for my YouTube channel. And so then they were like, hey, they were doing this series of workbooks, basically, on various topics. And they asked me if I would like to contribute, and they thought, maybe my husband and I could write some sort of book, because at the time we were RVing full time. So my husband and I and our 3 kids were living in an RV, traveling all across America. And so it was just a neat opportunity. And so we decided to write a book about communication in marriage, because that was something we felt like was really important. We've been married at this point for 19 years, almost 20. And we just felt like communication is just such an important part of a good marriage. So we did that book. And actually, I think right now it's out of print. I do have the rights to it, so I'm thinking about putting it back on KDP. I've not done it because I've had all these other projects going on. So
right. Well, I think it's, I love the title of it, and I do believe that communication, especially with our husbands or everyone, is important. So I'm looking forward to learning or maybe getting the book or whatever it is in the future. So that's really cool. And then there's another cute book you have about baby potty training. Potty from day one.
Yeah.
Author, this is really cute though. That's really neat. What is that book about?
So when we had our first baby, we were my husband was in the military, and of course very tight budget, and one of the things that I was thinking about was like, oh my gosh, like diapers are so expensive, and I hated the idea of like putting all these diapers in the landfill. It just felt like, man, it felt kind of wrong. So I looked online, and I came across this website that talked about infant potty training, and I was like, what infant potty training? Because most of the books I had read talked about like potty training at like age 3 or like even later these days. But I remembered that my mom had potty trained me by the time I was 2. Like that used to be kind of the rule. And so when I read this blog about potty training from birth, I realized I learned that like in other parts of the world, it's a common thing to train your baby to eliminate, outside of the diaper, and or they hold them over a pot or things like that, and that used to be the tradition even in America back in the early days. A lot of times the habit would be to when the baby woke up, they would hold them over the pot and things like that so that you save diapers. And so I thought, well, that's kind of neat. So we ended up doing this with our all 3 kids, and I loved the process. So I thought, like this is not something that most people know about. Like I had not really heard about it. So
wow, I love that, and it's I never thought about the fact that what people did in history, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. See, I just love that. I'm so happy you're on this, happy with you're here with me. So one thing I would love to talk about is, and you do mention it all the time, is your faith in God.
Mm-hmm.
And how God is, like really part of this whole process. And would love for you to share that, your process, your beliefs.
Yeah. So, and this is something that I just had to kind of learn slowly through this process of weight loss, and then also in maintenance, just how often I had been turning to food instead of turning to God for comfort, for, just whenever I was worried. A lot of times, instead of just praying about the thing and asking for God's help, I would just, shove something else in my mouth. And I didn't even realize I was doing it at the time. And it was really through the process of intermittent fasting, because I had this rule, I'm not going to eat during this period of time. And there are so many times, though, during that fasting window where I would find myself upset about something. And my initial habit, like I would find myself in the kitchen right in the middle of my fasting window, and I would think, what am I doing in here? Like, I'm not eating right now. So, like, what's going on? And I realized, like, oh, I'm upset right now. Like, I am upset and I am seeking comfort. So I've got to figure out something else to do besides eat. And you would think, like, okay, you would just think to pray. But a lot of times I didn't really think to, like, okay, I need to just stop and pray. What I did instead was I would go get my steps in. Like, a lot of times that was the best answer, was like, I just need to get out of the house, or a lot of times I would just get all 6 miles inside my house. I would just walk around. But while I was walking, I would pray, like I would just be thinking about like what's going on. And I just started to pray about whatever it was that was bothering me. And so many times, just that act of walking and praying, it would either give me peace about the situation, because sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it. There's just this situation and it's there, and there's no action you can really take, but you got to like make your peace with it. And then there were other times, though, that through the process of, kind of talking it out with God, I would realize there's something I need to do about this. Like, there's an action I need to take. And so, praying for strength to do it, whatever that thing was. Sometimes it was like, I need to have this hard conversation with this other person, or, like, I need to do a better job of managing our finances, or, like, whatever the thing was, like, being out on that walk and talking with God was really helpful. And it was interesting to see over time how many spiritual things were tied up in my weight problem, just being holding grudges against people who in the past had made fun of me about my weight, or just like all these like childhood things, even like the stuff from so long ago that I was still holding on to, and that I didn't really realize at first, but over time I was starting to understand, or starting to notice rather, my inner dialogue, like when I sit down to eat, what's going through my head. And so many times, I would be bringing up these things, like these mean things people had said. And then I realized, like, I need to forgive that. I need to, like, forgive all these people, because first of all, we were kids, and even if they weren't kids, even if it was like somebody, an adult who said something, I had to forgive it. And which is, a very important part of being a Christian, is to forgive these things. And so that was certainly something I learned.
And I think that's when I'll ask questions of you on chat or on YouTube or whatever, I always go for that part, because that's my part, is the emotional eating and the and stress eating. So I love what you're saying. I think that's so very helpful to everyone. And I love that phrase, like, just stop and pray. That, because I think about that too. Like, why aren't I just praying? Why aren't I doing this to God? And so, because then, like, even like this week thing, because I wasn't doing it, I was in emotional, but then once I do, then it starts to work. So I love that you care about that. That would be a great book to write about something like that.
Yeah, and that's a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there that, I think there's a lot of people that don't realize it. They think that we're not supposed to ask God for all these things, but from my life, I realize, like, we are supposed to really stay in constant contact as much as possible with God. You were recently on when you were moving and traveling, and then the pandemic kind of shut everything down. What was that like when you were out on the road and all of that happened?
Yeah, so it was kind of the weirdest time of my life. It was such an uncertain time. Like, we were in Florida at the time, and everything was fine at first, but then we started to notice that, like, everything was shutting down, like even the state parks. So we had been in the habit of just staying in state parks. That was what we loved. We loved going to, out into nature. And so when we were in Florida and they announced the closure of all state parks, then we kind of were like, okay, now what are we going to do? Because, it was funny, because on the news, they were trying to say, like, don't travel anywhere, don't do anything, like the government's telling you don't do that, but at the same time they shut down all the parks. So it made it so that we had to travel to go find these different places to stay. So we ended up having to go into Georgia, and we were getting a little bit nervous because we weren't really sure how widespread will the closures be? Like, are they going to close down every state park in America? And there were even at one point there was some like gossip that they were going to shut down all the RV parks, like not for the people who actually permanently live there, but for travelers like us, like they would be like shut down. And so I was like, well, this is a terrible idea to be out on the road. So we ended up saying we were already kind of winding down anyway, like in October of 2019, we started to say, I think we're probably done. It's been a really fun adventure, but we wanted to get back into, a house and have more of a just stable kind of life. So I think it was like April of 2020, we got into a permanent house, and we've enjoyed that lifestyle since then.
Yay! I think about that time and I'm like, I'm so glad we all made it. Some of us made it through it. And I hope that doesn't happen again. But you know what? It makes you think about, like, if you were to do it, like, we've seen how that can happen, it's scary. Anyway, we don't want to talk about yucky stuff.
Right.
Once upon a time, there was this amazing place. It was called America. And everywhere you looked, people were smiling and laughing. What happened to America? Land of the free and the home of the brave. The place where I was born. America, where people went to become Monday, and everyone went to church on Sunday, so they could hear the preacher say, pray for America. Round and round and round and round the world goes. Everybody's talking, nobody knows. Everybody's telling everybody's tonight. So much confusion on the street, and everybody's lies. Everybody's lying. Church bells ringing. So I wanna hear the choir singing. Glory, hallelujah. Church bells ringing. I wanna hear church bells ring. I wanna hear the choir singing. Does a lot to no one is singing. I wanna know what's going on in America. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3, yeah. Read a page of history. Lessons must be learned to where they serve me. Sing it like a nursery rhyme, for we all run out of time, and there is no more clean air and water, no more truth, no more freedom. Round and round and round and round the world goes. Violence on the TV, violence on the internet, violence in the games the children play. What happened to America? America, the people. Begin with the golden rule, we'll end up like a fool instead of just doing any other. Singing like a nursery rhyme, for we only States of America. I'll get down on my knees right now and I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna pray for America. God bless you.